Thank you very much. Can I turn to another topic, the LHDs? Because these is such a long-running project.
The appropriate officer, Senator.
Yes, if you could.
Thank you.
We're good, thanks, Senator.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Senator.
Look, given that these projects, the LHD project predates a number of the senators that are actually in the Senate, I'm wondering if you could perhaps answer a few simple questions about the project so that we can perhaps begin from the same baseline. When do the procurement for these vessels start?
Senator Kim Gillis, Deputy Secretary Capability Acquisition and Sustainment. I think it started off in 2004.
Thank you. And the particular vessels, when were they chosen?
From memory, I think about 2007.
Thank you. This is the Howard government.
Yes, Senator.
That's right. Now, this was clearly a bipartisan decision to purchase this capability, but it was a decision of the Howard government.
Yes, Senator, they were the government at the time.
Yes, that's right. And how long are these particular vessels been in for repair?
Senator, it varies between Canberra and Adelaide, but I'll actually pass to Admiral Grunzel, who's the Head of Maritime Systems Division, who is actually dealing with the ships on a day-to-day basis.
Good morning, Senator. Adam Grunsell, Head of Maritime Systems in Capability Acquisition and Sustainment Group. Senator, the HMAS Adelaide docked in mid-March. I'm just preparing the date here. The 17th of March was the date that Adelaide went into dock. I'm sorry, I said March, I meant May, the 18th of May. And one correction, Senator, I just looked at the wrong date. It's the 17th of May. 17th of May, Adelaide went into dock.
Right. And Canberra?
And Canberra has been alongside conducting repairs, and she conducted some sea trials between the 18th and 19th of May.
Thank you. And have they, has it been identified they've got the same problem?
Senator, if I may, Vice Admiral Tim Barrett, Chief of Navy. I'll just make a point of clarification there. The ships identified an issue on the 7th of March. Mm-hmm. The ships returned to Sydney, Canberra first, on the 17th of March. Adelaide arrived shortly thereafter. March. The ships have been in Sydney at that time while we investigate. And as part of the repair plan, Adelaide, as we've heard, moved into the dry dock on the 17th of May. And Canberra conducted sea trials on the, I think, 17th, 18th of May.
Mm-hmm. But were those vessels identified with the problem at that time, or were you able to continue, given that the sea trials continued, I presume?
Senator, the issue was identified in HMS Canberra, which was off the north-east coast of Australia, on the 7th of March.
Yes.
Prudence dictated that we looked at Adelaide to see if they had a similar issue, and we had evidence that there were some issues that we thought were similar, so we decided to return Adelaide at the same time so we can investigate both.
Mm-hmm. And is it now the assessment that both have a similar problem with the propulsion pods?
The issue is with the propulsion pods. I briefed estimates on the 30th of March for this particular case. There are some differences in what we have found between the two problems. The sea trials that you referred to in HMAS Canberra were part of our remediation plan as we sorted through those issues that we believed to be the problem, and they are in the pod itself.
Right, and so is there? You've actually identified the cause of the problem?
It would be fair to say that we've closed it down to an issue we believe to be either seals, that is between certain parts of the pod itself, and in Adelaide, a possible issue with a bearing or bearings within the pod itself. And we've identified that because there are slight differences in some of the information we've been able to glean from our investigation.
But given there are similar problems, variations is
Yes.
Clearly evident, but there are similar problems.
To strengthen that, I will say we have seen what we now believe to be migration of oils between certain parts on either side of those seals within the pod.
So
Within the pod, you'd use oils to do a number of things. You do it to lubricate bearings, or you may use it to pressurise seals to prevent seawater from coming into the pod itself. And what we have found in some cases that we've got in both ships, we've got migration of those oils between seals, across seals.
So is this a
the issue
design-
in Adelaide is that we have also found that there is a particulate above a certain level that then points to something which could well be bearings.
So a design problem?
Look, I'm not. It's been characterised. I've said it's a design problem. That's not correct. In terms of a root cause analysis, we would look at everything from the design right through to maintenance, right through to how it's being operated. At the moment, it points to an issue with the seal in terms of a seal that might be unseated, and for the bearing, we're just looking at whether it's an issue with the bearing itself, just its age or its the way it's been seated within the pod itself. So I'm not characterising it as a design fault. That would be speculation. And the fact that we are conducting a visual inspection of the pod and the bearings whilst the ship is in dry dock just means we're looking at all aspects before we make a statement as to what the true cause of the problem was.
I see. You say it's an age problem. These vessels were commissioned in 14 and 15. You say it's an age problem?
The bearing itself, we don't know until we visually identified whether that bearing is showing signs of degradation. If it is, then like you, I would be concerned because the age of that bearing should not prompt it to be deteriorating at this stage. We don't know until we've visually inspected those bearings.
And is this a problem the manufacturers identified before?
We have the original equipment manufacturers, Siemens, looking at this at the moment. It's a concern to them as much as it is to us because they weren't expecting this itself. We have not identified that this is something that we should have expected, nor are we identifying this as being something that is fleet-wide across all of the azimuth pods that are used around the world. And there are hundreds of these azimuth pods that are used in ships around the
And
world.
Vice Admiral, that's why I asked the question. If there are hundreds of these systems in service around the world, how many other cases have you identified?
I'll pass at this stage to the DepSec, who has more knowledge of where these are used elsewhere and is responsible for the sustainment of them.
Senator, a number of the large cruise lines operate azimuthing pods. Some of them have identified some issues with seals, and there has been remediation on those seals. Ours is a fairly select group of that particular type of pods for our 2 LHDs and for the 1 Carlos, which is the Spanish Armada's vessel. So those ones are almost identical, but they are fairly unique in the world in respect to the specific configuration.
Okay. So Gilly, there's been no other incidents of this type identified in any other fleet users?
No, there have been issues with azimuthing pods in their early years. There were a number of issues identified with azimuthing pods, but it's not been consistent across the fleet.
This is the Australian fleet?
No, the international fleet.
Yeah, international fleet. Yeah. So how many cases have you identified?
I haven't got that data.
Would you take that on notice?
I can take that on notice. But it's very similar to what you would find in bearings on ships or other things on ships. Or this is, ships are complex pieces of equipment, and sometimes you will have a fault. But at this stage, we haven't identified what the issue is. And as the Chief of Navy said, we're doing a root cause analysis, and a root cause analysis looks at...
I'll come to that, but is there an issue here about whether or not these ships are covered by warranty?
Senator, until we find out what the cause is, then that's a matter for whether it's warranty or a latent defect. So if in fact it is a design issue, we'll then have a discussion with Siemens and to the manufacturers through both BAE, Navantia and Siemens, because there's a contractual relationship with those three companies. But until we've actually identified what the issue is, it's speculation as to whether this is a warranty issue or not.
Can you tell me what exactly is a root cause analysis?
I'm not an engineer, but it's an engineering term where you look at all of those aspects from design, maintenance, operations, everything. So you look at the entirety of the engineering of a particular piece of equipment to identify what the root cause is. And in questioning, I think one of the journalists questioned the Chief of Navy about root cause analysis. He used the terms, including the design, the maintenance, the operations, and a whole range of things. That was then interpreted as we had stated that there was a design fault, which was incorrect. We don't know.
And, I mean, these vessels wouldn't have actually done a lot of work, would they, in that length of time?
Senator, they've actually done quite a lot of sea time, but I'll refer back to the Chief of Navy in respect to the operations of the vessel.
How much sea time have they done?
Over the last 2 years, we've had quite an ambitious program to prove their capability, which they've done remarkably well. We have they've spent more time at sea, almost double, than the Spanish ship of the same type. It's anywhere, I'll get the figures for you, Senator, I'll put them on record, but it's about 120 days of sea time in the last, in fact, I think it's more than that, it's about 180 days last year, it's about 110 days this year, but I'll clarify those figures.
Thank you. And the Spanish have a similar vessels?
They have one vessel.
And do they have a similar problem?
Carlos. They don't have a similar problem. They have a problem with their azimuth pod at the moment, but it's not of a similar nature. That is, it's not oil migration within the pod, and it's not a bearing issue.
And when will the analysis be completed? What's your expectations?
If you're happy. As I mentioned, we, in a deliberate approach, we put one ship into dry dock, that is Adelaide. We are investigating the bearings and the oils in that ship at the moment. The analysis of that will be ongoing over the next couple of weeks. We sent Canberra to sea on the 18th of May. We have tested the oil in that ship since she came back alongside. We expect to get those results within 2 weeks. Our plan then would be to, dependent on the nature of those, to send her back to sea towards the end of June.
I see. So you would expect these vessels to be back in commission by the end of June?
Again, I don't wish to speculate on what we find. The plan that we have in place is for Canberra to go back to sea at the end of June. If she does that, she will participate in Exercise Talisman Sabre, but she may have operating limits on her. She is then due to go back into a docking period, a dry dock, which was a scheduled maintenance period in the third quarter of this year. We will bring Adelaide out of the dock at the end of June. She will conduct some trials to see whether the work we've done while she's been in dock has been successful. And if there's anything that we discover from her that we then need to apply to Canberra, it will be done in that docking in the third quarter of this year.
Right.
So the expectation that both ships, if I may finish, that both ships will be able to be back in service by the end of by the fourth quarter of this year.
They would have been out of service for most of this year.
They will have been alongside for more time. They will have been at sea this year,
Yes,
Senator.
yes.
That's correct.
So how much?
Both ships. Yeah. Canberra was due to be in maintenance for a particular period of time, and the same with Adelaide at the beginning of this year.
And so the Operation Talisman Sabre, how long, how much of that operation will the vessels participate in?
It's an exercise, not an operation.
Oh, sorry, an exercise.
The ships, there are more than 30 ships participating in that exercise. There's actually a significant number of amphibious ships that are participating. It was our original intent to prove the ADF amphibious capability, including the LHDs, during that exercise. So the exercise does not swing on the participation of our ships, but we were using it as a means to prove the full capability. We will now need to look at proving that capability in other ways. We've already managed to do a lot with the ships operating at, one ship operating at exercise RIMPAC last year, but we will need to change the nature of how our contribution to Talisman Sabre works so we can still prove that amphibious capability. But as I've indicated, at this stage, we are planning to send Canberra to Talisman Sabre.
Mm-hmm. And is it the case that the repairs can actually be undertaken in Australia?
Sorry.
Senator, yeah, we're actually undertaking that in the Garden Island graving dock as we speak. Mm. We do have a number of Siemens experts in Australia. Some of the actual designers of the pods have actually been in Australia to actually look and assist us. But predominantly, I was there last Thursday. Predominantly, the group was Australian engineers working for Siemens and BAE with Australian naval engineers there.
And so will they be repaired or be replaced? The pods, will they be repaired or replaced?
It depends on what the outcome is, but my assessment would be it would be a repair and not a significant repair, but depending on what the outcome is. Did we buy spare pods when we purchased the vessels? No, we didn't. We did buy a full set of spares for those because they pods... So we have sufficient spares to cover this? We had sufficient spares for one pod, but what we found is that when we had two, that was one of the reasons for the delays. We actually had to import spares to actually get for the second And have
pod. We had any trouble getting spares?
Yes, Senator. Rear Admiral Adam Grunsell. We have had some delays. We've had to increase our priority on some of the orders internationally, and that, as Mr Gillis has indicated, that has increased the delay.
Thank you. We'll now suspend for morning tea, and Senator Xenophon will be asking questions at 10:45, after which I'll go back to you, Senator Carr. Thank you. We'll resume at 10:45.